Stephanie for Let's Talk Bitcoin. I'm here talking with Trace Mayer. Hi, Trace.
Hey.
Welcome to Let's Talk Bitcoin.
Glad to be here.
You are pretty famous in the world of people who want their privacy.
We launched howtovanish.com back in about mid-2008. And it's, help people take control of their privacy because there's so many threats like identity theft, etc., that can just really wreak havoc on people and cost a lot of money. And there's a lot of small, simple things you can do to help protect your privacy. And if you're just conscious of your privacy hygiene, I mean, we take a shower every day. Like, why don't we be cognizant of the data and information that we're leaving around in the world?
Yeah, it's especially relevant now with not just the NSA and government spying and all kinds of governments wanting to know what you're doing so they can tax you and regulate you, but also companies using your information to market stuff to you.
Oh yeah, and not just market stuff, but Google, for example, got a patent on price discrimination. So they'll use your web browsing history, and so will Amazon, and from that, they'll actually serve you a different price.
Wow.
Yeah, so they can charge you more, charge you less because they have a little bit more knowledge about you, and so they know what your elasticity of demand is going to be, or can at least reasonably approximate it. And pretty soon, credit cards might be integrated with your health insurance, for example, or they'll look at your buying patterns there, charge you more health insurance because you bought Domino's Pizza. I think that was the ad. So
I hear your credit score can affect the insurance rates that you pay for all kinds of stuff, including health insurance.
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, if I were an insurance company, I'd probably use credit scores because there's actually a study done like your health and your wealth are the most tightly correlated, and so even more than like educational level or zip code, etc. So I mean, yeah, there's a lot to whether you can responsibly manage your credit and whether you can responsibly manage your health.
Wow.
So for insurance companies, I definitely see why they'd want access to that data or information, but I don't necessarily want to give it to them, right?
Yeah.
So, or at least not give it to them without getting a lower premium, and so which they might not want to give me. They might want to
give you a higher one because you paid higher for stuff before, right?
Yeah. Well, if I pay a higher premium, but they have more knowledge that decreases the risk, then they can make more profit. So it's just people need to understand that like their data, their information, all of this stuff, it's valuable. Information can be gleaned from it for pricing signals, and corporations, whatnot, they're going to take advantage of it to make their shareholders the most amount of money as they can, if they can.
And your background is as an attorney, right?
So accounting, law degree. I don't practice as an attorney.
So tell me how you first got interested in Bitcoin and sort of what excited you about Bitcoin.
So I came across Bitcoin on the internet way back in the early days, kind of like Roger Ver.
What's the early days? Like 2010, 2011?
Yeah, maybe even before then, because we wrote an article on How to Vanish, actually a YouTube video for How to Vanish about Bitcoin, published, I think, January of 2011. So, well before that. And I was just fascinated with it because it's pseudo-anonymous. I mean, you could realize from its architecture with the blockchain, I've never considered it anonymous or something that you'd necessarily even want to do illicit things with because it's relatively easy to at least trace transactions. But in terms of not having to give a merchant all your information when you're checking out, etc., I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And plus, it's equity-based and there's no counterparty risk. So I wrote a book in 2008 called The Great Credit Contraction, and I see Bitcoin as a potential solution to that. And so, yeah, I mean, Bitcoin kind of tickled the ears in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I'm curious what the reaction was among the readers of your site when you started to get interested in Bitcoin and started writing about it and so forth. I know you have a beginner's Bitcoin book that you give away on your website, but I could imagine kind of two camps. One who's really interested in it, perhaps younger people, and another who says, this is a Ponzi scheme. So what was it from your readers?
A lot of them just didn't understand it, which I don't blame them. That's why I did write the freebitcoinguide.com to help people get into Bitcoin, kind of experiment with the technology. But also with my other site, runtogold.com, where I published The Great Credit Contraction. So I talked with a lot of the gold bugs and a lot of everybody in that niche, and some of them understood it, some of them didn't. Some of them I had to walk them through sending their first transaction, like Jeff Berwick, for example. I sent him his first Bitcoin transaction, walked him through everything. Tom Woods, Lou Rockwell, antiwar.com, just a lot of these sites. I eventually, just got so fed up with some of the negative resistance that I wrote an article on How to Vanish, why Liberty proponents, why Bitcoin's a litmus test for whether you're a Liberty proponent or not. And in that article, I made the argument that when you're paying with a credit card or giving a donation with a credit card, I mean, all that information is by de facto collected and archived, database stored, searchable. So, like, if you're a real, if you're a problem at the TSA and you want to figure out who to harass, you could just query the database, figure out everybody who's made a donation to antiwar.com and a donation to LouRockwell.com. And if the donations have been over $50, they're automatically screened for secondary inspection with TSA. You could write a query like that. And so whether Lou Rockwell and Antiwar intend for the information to be used that way, it is able to be used that way. So they have to, they're either intentionally or unintentionally what's called a honeypot for the intelligence establishments. And so they should accept Bitcoin donations because your identity is not necessarily tied directly with the transaction like with credit cards. So it drastically increases the cost on being able to link the two. They can't just run a query like that. So that I was like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. It's force multiplier and very helpful. So yeah, we should be embracing this because it makes it more difficult to collate and get all this various data and information.
Right. So, that's kind of a history, I guess, of where you've gone with Bitcoin and how you got interested in it. But where are you at right now? I think you said you're excited about multi-signature transactions, right?
Yeah. So with Armory, I help fund BitPay, Armory, and Kraken. Those are kind of the three that I'm helping incubate and working with and funding. And with Armory, we're building out the actual foundation where you can secure your private keys. And I think this is one of the big deals with Bitcoin is you can literally hold the private keys of wealth, of property yourself. I mean, there's no eminent domain. You hold the dominion or control. And that's a very libertarian thing, regardless of whether it's tied to identity or trackable or whatever. You holding the private keys instead of a bank or the Fed holding the private keys or the local government holding the private keys in the case of car, real estate, etc. And so with this new multi-sig implementation with Armory, we can hold the private keys in cold storage, which I like to say helps us really protect ourselves from the CIA or NSA, etc. Makes it very secure to hold your Bitcoins. And with multi-sig, it means that you have to compromise multiple computers too, or multiple seeds.
So what is multi-sig for somebody who doesn't know what it is?
Yeah, so you've got your public key, which is your Bitcoin address, and then you have your private key, and that would be one of one. And with multi-sig, there's in the Bitcoin protocol, you can actually have it require, say, 2 of 3, or 5 of 7, or 15 of 20. And so then...
some trading bell going off in the background.
Yeah, Satoshi Squared inside Bitcoins. So if you need, say, 3 of 5, then you have to digitally sign with 3 signatures out of 5 in order to move the Bitcoins instead of just 1 signature. So you could have that then on 5 different computers or however your own personal situation is set up to do.
Right, because an individual could potentially be coerced into giving up their private keys or whatever, even if you're the only one who holds your private keys. But if you're in a situation of coercion, perhaps, and in order to move any of your Bitcoins out of your cold storage life savings, you need, 3 of 5 people to sign off on it, and those 3 of 5 people don't even necessarily know who each other are, then it's pretty hard to coerce someone into giving up their Bitcoins that way.
Yeah, you can definitely build stuff like that. One of the reasons I wanted to get Armory funded and built and everything like this is because from accounting we have a concept called segregation of duties, and in order for Wall Street to come in and bring in, say, $500 million, they have to feel comfortable that it's being properly secured. It's the elephant in the room. And in order to do that with a centralized entity, you have to presume that your employee is malicious. they might be a good person, but you have to presume they're malicious. In fact, you should probably presume that they're all malicious. And so, you need to decentralize, you need to distribute the trust among enough people where they're not likely to collude together, even if coerced. And so, like in my case, I don't say whether I have any Bitcoins, but even if I did, I would secure them in a way where, like, even if my niece were abducted, my nephew were abducted, like, maybe we need them at the vault in order to get access to the vault, in order to get to the private keys that could actually move the Bitcoins. That could be deep cold storage of Bitcoins. And then you might have, like, cold storage of Bitcoin. So, maybe I can get access to $50,000 worth of Bitcoins or something pretty easily. But you're having to trade off security and convenience. But if you're building for institutions or organizations, you have to pretty much presume that everybody's going to be malicious, and so you need to build the system so that they're not going to be likely to collude.
Right. So is this doable now? Is it ready for prime time?
Well, we have a working demo implementation of Bitcoin Armory with multi-sig cold storage already. I mean, that's what we're demoing today.
At the Inside Bitcoins.
Here at Inside Bitcoins, April 2014.
Can someone download that and play around with it?
Yeah, you can download it, play around with it. It's still a little rough around the edges, so it's going to need to get polished off. But yeah, it'll probably be ready for prime time in the next few weeks or month or so. And that means Wall Street could come in with like big amounts of money and feel comfortable with it, or an insurance company or a bank.
And how does that work on the blockchain? Would you be able to see that multiple parties signed off on a certain transaction? So,
yeah, I mean,
would we be able to track if a large financial institution engaged in a multi-signature transaction and say, oh, this must mean that 12 of the 13 executives said that this was approved this and said that it was okay?
You're probably not necessarily going to see it to that granularity unless you know what exactly is going on behind the scene. But just a general overview, there's going to be a difference, like on the address. Usually addresses start with a 1, and the multi-signature addresses, they'll start with a 3. And so, that's a good way that you can see whether more multi-sig addresses are being used. But there are more creative ways that we can distribute keys also, where there might be some obfuscation about how many people are signing, who's signing, etc. Because we want to have good operational security, and part of that's not leaking information.
Right. On the other hand, though, it's also an opportunity for transparency, right? For instance, for companies who want people to be able to see that certain transactions are being approved by the appropriate parties, right?
Yeah, like say that you wanted to know that your food was coming from Whole Foods. You wanted to know that the supply chain were all organic, and that they were not sending any money to buy drones, for example, to bomb innocent civilians. Well, you can enforce that all through the blockchain in a very transparent manner. So, this open source general ledger definitely has an ability to bring more sunshine. It's the best disinfectant in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, you can enforce a lot of that transparency also in the blockchain. And it'll be interesting to see what consumers and individuals demand from their service providers.
What about smart contracts and smart property? Are you into those at all?
I've been following it with interest, like the Ethereum project particularly. But I mean, I think we will be able to do significant stuff with Bitcoin itself, but I think a lot of the innovation that's going to happen around the edges, the innovation without permission that Andreas talks about, it's going to probably be pushed out of Bitcoin and happen in altcoins, and then when it can be folded or rolled back into Bitcoin. So I think we're going to see a lot of opportunity outside of Bitcoin in the altcoins and the other like cryptocurrency 2.0 stuff for development and innovation in this area.
Do you have any particular altcoins or 2.0 protocols that you're following with the most interest or anything like that?
Well, Ethereum is the one that's got kind of most of my interest, but it's still very much early stage. I mean, currency is just the first application of Bitcoin, and you really have to be in this with the long-term game plan. And so I mean, you look at my investments, there's Armory, which is the security. You got to be able to secure your Bitcoins. There's BitPay, which is the merchant processing, the currency use. There's Kraken, which is the exchange, and then, we got Namecoins on Kraken and Litecoins. And I love this Namecoin concept of decentralizing DNS and using it as this for like authentication and things like that. So, I mean, we have so many different. We have to bring trust back to the internet, especially in this post-Snowden era where trust has been pretty much completely eviscerated from the internet. We're going to have to reconstitute the internet. Things like MadeSafe, Bitcoin are going to play essential roles as additional protocol layers in doing this. At least I think so. Mm-hmm. And smart contracts are going to definitely come into play in all of this, but baby steps. We have to take a long-term view, I think. Like, this isn't just going to happen in the next 2 years. This is going to be like a 20, 30-year process transitioning into the information age. And it's going to, I think we underappreciate just how much human capital and talent and how complex and technical this work is. And people have to be motivated to do that work. And what motivates them? And how do you motivate them, and how do you get the work done, etc. And the more complex and technical the work is to do, the harder it is to motivate someone just by writing them a check. But that's where I think that this ultimately, what we've done with Bitcoin, we've changed the economics of violence, and the internet, and even now with Bitcoin, freedom is more profitable than it's ever been. And it's only going to get more and more profitable. And that's what's, I think, is really exciting, is that we've literally changed the tectonic plates of the economic calculation, of the economics. And that's going to lead to a whole new world being built, in my opinion.
Well, that was great, and it's a great note to end on, but I just have one last question, which is, are you kind of concerned about people data mining the blockchain or any of the potential traceability issues with Bitcoin? And, how do you recommend people get started exploring taking greater financial privacy measures with their Bitcoins?
Yeah, so that's where I think a lot of the altcoins will come into play. They might be on-ramps or off-ramps, as Andreas has talked about. Yeah, the blockchain's definitely going to get data mined. Personally, I haven't really, I don't really do a lot of transactions, if I do any transactions at all. From a criminal defense perspective, can't confirm or deny whether I've done any transaction. You need to prove it. And so I think people need to... things like CoinJoin and CoinSwap, which introduce increased plausible deniability, dark wallet, dark coin, Anon coin, building a lot of this stuff in there. We can't make Bitcoin all things to all people all the time. If we're going to be able to harness this unalterable, unforgeable digital ledger, which is the first practical implementation of triple entry bookkeeping, which is a huge, huge advancement in terms of accounting theory and monetary science. If we're going to harness that, we can't necessarily just build into the protocol automatic swapping of coins, because then we can't harness other uses or abilities for that particular resource. And so, we can have a different altcoin that does have that built into it, or we can be using CoinSwap. And misinformation, disinformation, misdirection, you can put information in the blockchain just like everybody else. And so, wild goose chases, they're a lot of fun. And at the end of the day, where are they going to get the resources to continue analyzing and researching all this stuff? And if you just exponentially keep raising the costs on them, intentionally or unintentionally or whatever, great, just make a big old mess for them to try and sift through. It's a lot of fun. And, so I kind of look at it from a perspective of, you need to be practical, you need to be realist, but look at the economics, and that's where, it's when you harness the economics of the situation that you can really begin to cause change, because not everybody values freedom, and for the most part, people have been able to free ride off of the sacrifices other people have made for the last couple hundred years, particularly in America. And I think that we're going to be increasingly moving into an era where people are going to have to take, freedom's going to become increasingly a luxury good, and people are going to have to be willing to pay for it and have the human capital and ability to acquire it. And it'll be there for people who want to acquire it. But like even here at Inside Bitcoins, like Alan Reiner, CEO of Armory, he was talking about holding your own private keys. And you could tell that a lot of people in the audience didn't want to hold their own private keys to their own money. And
wow.
It's like...
They're not used to that.
Yeah, I mean, people... And when you think about it, we... Like... 2 millennia ago, most people were slaves. And then 500 years ago, most people were serfs. Mm-hmm. And, but we've been decentralizing the keys of wealth and property. And, and then most people worked in a factory. And then, most people worked for a company for 30 years. Now most people are freelancers. I mean, we're moving in this direction of more accountability individually. People have credit cards and bank accounts. I mean, people are taking a lot more control over their finances, whether they intend to or not, but this is another step where you're literally going to be holding the private keys of wealth and property yourself. And that means that you can stake out that sovereign monetary jurisdiction in cyberspace. And that's exciting, and Armory is a great tool to be able to do that with. And individuals are going to have to want to do it. I mean, you can't make a slave free. Like, slave wants to be a slave, slave's going to be a slave. But like never before have we had an opportunity to harness these tools of technology to increase our freedom, whether it's Bitcoin, Namecoin, BitMessage, MadeSafe, KeePassX, Tor, I2P, Tails, like whatever it is, CJDNS, Hyperborea. I mean, we have so many of these tools. People just really have to claim their freedom if they want it. And it's going to be increasingly costly to go after the people that are claiming their freedom. And at the end of the day, not all of the buffalo make it across the river, but the alligators are going to go after the weakest of the swimmers. And if you adapt and grow wings and fly over the river, the alligator's not going to care about you.
I love it. All right, where can people connect with you on the internet?
Howtovanish.com is a good place, runtogold.com, and then the freebitcoinguide.com if you want to get that.
Cool. Trace, thanks so much for being on the show with me.
Wonderful. Thanks, Stephanie.
Let's Talk Bitcoin is heard each week by thousands of people who are participating in the new digital economy. Our listener base of Bitcoin owners, miners, investors, technologists, and merchants is growing fast. We offer a limited number of short advertising slots in each show to keep our listeners engaged and to provide maximum impact for our sponsors. If you'd like to talk to us about Let's Talk Bitcoin, send us an email at sponsors@letstalkbitcoin.com.